Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm excited as always to be here with you. This is one of the few occasions where I've had the pleasure of talking to someone literally from my home city, and I can't think of anyone more interesting to talk to than Freyja Garbett. As you'll hear, Freyja's had an amazing career to date, and she's barely getting started, both in the US, Australia, and elsewhere to some extent as well. So we try to cover as much of that as possible, and her approach through both jazz, funk, soul, pop, rock, you name it, she's done it, and she's had a hell of a learning experience along the way, and we definitely cover off a lot of that. So yeah, I do hope you enjoyed this a great deal, and I'll talk to you after the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. How are you this fine Wollongong evening?
I am wonderful, thank you, David. How about yourself?
Good. I think you're only the second ever guest that I've been able to do on the local time zone as far as our own city. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you here amongst all the other amazing things we're going to talk about.
It's an honour.
I thought we'd start off with what you've got coming up over the next 12 months. We've got so much to talk about what you've done in recent years, but I thought, what's on the near horizon for you? I know you're doing some more recording and so on. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so essentially I've just recorded an album actually last week, my, sophomore album, and that's at ABC. That was at ABC. So that'll be on the ABC album. And yeah, it was, a suite of music of mine that I've been developing for some time. And it's called Music from the Waves. And that's featuring Australian saxophonist Sandy Evans. And then I also had some really gorgeous vocalists come in and do some work. And then I have McAll on double bass and Miles Thomas on the drums. And yeah, it's quite an eclectic fusion of styles. And I think growing up in this area, it's hard to not be influenced by the ocean. And for me, I've become an avid surfer. So yeah, highly inspired by that too.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about more. As you said, it's quite a diverse album. I did see on your Instagram someone had reviewed it as a prog rock wig out. Just tell us a little bit more about what your approach was there and what itch it scratched for you.
Yeah. That is such a badass review. We just did a gig down at the Monash Big Jazz Day Out Festival a couple of weeks ago, and a writer, she wrote the prog rock wig out, and I was like, man, that's just so accurate. Essentially, there are elements of the work that I do creating music on Ableton and using synthesizers as like a bed for me to do some spoken word stuff over. But then we do a lot of improvised elements too. And then there's some through composed pieces, which maybe that's what she's referencing, because they might start off quite almost folky or just quite pretty, and it's hard to explain really without showing you, but then all of a sudden we'll just kind of go into this really, straight 16ths heavy kind of, feel. And then that might disassemble into something quite bizarre and improvised. So yeah, it is a journey. And I guess I'm trying to emulate my experience of surfing and the experience of different waves and the nature of the ocean.
Brilliant, love it. No, so we'll definitely come back to the prog rock or the synthy stuff later on for sure. Yeah. But I do want to jump back to your musical upbringing. So tell us about Freyja Garbett, your early years, sort of into teenage years, and realising that you may have a sort of innate passion to do music for a living.
So I grew up in Otford, which is just this tiny little town. It's almost in the Royal National Park. And I guess I grew up there because my parents wanted to escape humans, and my dad, he was raised by, an audiophile and a violinist, my granddad. And then, my dad is just quite this eccentric character who almost taught himself all these instruments, and he would build violins and harpsichords and double basses, and that's just what he did for fun. And he would listen to a lot of jazz and a lot of classical music and folk music, all sorts of things. And that's just what I was around, and I guess he taught me violin and piano when I was quite young. I started learning violin when I was about 5, and then I started learning piano around the age of 8. And then my older brother was learning piano, and he became a professional trumpet player, and he began to, I guess, take part in the Wollongong Conservatorium jazz program and went on to study at Sydney Conservatorium. And I guess it was just sort of a natural thing for me to also be involved in those programs. And I didn't feel that very comfortable, learning jazz, but I was lucky that my dad kind of broke it down to me, and I attended the women's jazz course in Sydney. And actually that was led and is still led by Sandy Evans. And yeah, she's obviously featured on my album, which is really beautiful. And I guess I just sort of, I don't know, it's been an interesting journey. Like, I haven't really just stuck with the whole jazz route. I'm really into pop music. I'm really into reggae. I'm really into Afrobeat, funk, all sorts of things. So it's been, a bit of this, a bit of that. And I guess it wasn't until I I went to Berklee College of Music in 2012, and they actually came and auditioned people in Sydney. And I feel like that year was almost, I guess that was 2011. That was sort of like the cutoff year. It was like when the Aussie dollar was still strong. They were actually coming over to Australia to audition us. And I think it was like probably the last opportunity that for me that could have even been possible for my family and I. And it's just funny how things work. And I was just thrown into this whole new world. It was wild. And I guess I just was like, holy shit, there's so much cool stuff going on here. I need to practice a lot. Just locked myself in the practice room and felt, just so out of my depth, but also really nurtured in that environment, which was really nice. Like, there was just so much to choose from. You could study film scoring, you could study production and engineering, but there were just it was such a wide range of musicians and styles. Yeah. And I just was like, this is perfect for me, because I never felt like a jazz musician. Do you know what I mean? And I guess that kind of guided my journey.
Yeah.
And pushed me along a lot, because I was like in the deep end, and I was so in the deep end.
And let's talk a little bit about that deep end, Frey. So even though 70% of our audience is US based, there are a lot of us that aren't in the US. So I'm really fascinated. As a outsider quotation marks, what was the audition process and the actual rough course structure for you at Berklee? How was it so immersive and so invigorating?
The audition process was really simple. I think we just went into a room at JCM in Sydney and were asked to perform a tune or two solo, or I think I had a bass player with me, and we did some ear training and some scales maybe, and some reading. And then it was really relaxed. I was shocked. And then I think they generally offer really good scholarships for international students, because they realize obviously it's such a different thing for us, and we have to obviously pay for its accommodation and all of these extra costs. So I was very lucky to receive a nice scholarship for that somehow. And then the actual course structure there. So essentially you go over and they put you in like levels or bands. I can't remember or ratings. They give you ratings. So you go and do these rating auditions every semester or something. They give you numbers that mean, okay, you're able to be a part of these ensembles, and the ensembles might be anything from the Beyonce ensemble to the Art Blakey ensemble and the Jay Dilla ensemble. It was so cool. Then and I guess the ratings only determine the performance-based stuff, and then you go and do some sort of like placement ear training and theoretical examinations, and they place you in levels for that. And then the thing that took me by surprise and took me off guard was that studying in the US automatically means that you have to also undertake a liberal arts degree. So essentially I was just having to write these essays and attend all these classes, as well as, this huge, I guess, amount of work just in music alone. It was a lot. I was shocked. America, they're hardcore over there.
Yeah.
It's very different to attending Wollongong High School.
That's right.
Yeah.
But it sounds like, as you said, it sounds like an immersive experience, and I can only imagine the networks or collaborations you started there. So, I mean, when you finished at Berklee, what was your first series project may have started there, but what were the first musical projects you were getting heavily involved in throughout that period?
Yeah, so what was I getting heavily involved in? Probably what everybody was getting heavily involved in, which was like neo soul and Robert Glasper and Hiatus Coyote. This is just such a cliche. And then obviously I've always been an avid listener of different jazz pianists. Herbie Hancock, Bill Evans, Barney McCall in Australia. And I guess I probably was just attempting to emulate the playing of these great pianists, and then also play in neo soul and hip hop bands and be cool, you know? So, it was really interesting. I think I also got to meet all these amazing musicians who were already becoming something or were something. I mean, we literally could go and see these gigs for like $2 or I got to see Erykah Badu. I got to see D'Angelo playing with like Chris Dave and Pino Palladino. Erykah was playing with Chris Dave and Pino Palladino, and Pino was also on the D'Angelo gig for like $20 or something. Do you know what I mean? And it was just like, didn't even know the gig was on, and it was just like, oh yeah, that gig's on tonight. I was just like, wait, what? And I was obsessed with Erykah at that time. Yeah, it was fascinating, and I was learning from a pianist named Alain Mallet. Yeah. I think that's how you say it. I'm just like racking my brain. Oh yeah, that's right. And he was Alain Mallet, Alain. I think he used to be Paul Simon's musical director, but he's this French pianist, and he was really hardcore, and he told me how it was, and he made me feel really uncomfortable, but then also gave me just so much, he kind of was just such a great teacher. Like, I think I was really lucky to have these teachers who really broke it down, and they also had such a wide breadth of experience. Like, they didn't just play jazz, they played all these other styles of music, and they were producers. And I guess for me, that was quite eye-opening. I think in Australia, I often felt like it was this way or the highway, like this is what you do, and there was no really explanation. It was just like, do it. Whereas over there, I think they were obviously teaching all of these students from all these different backgrounds, and so they really had really great teaching chops. And yeah, I cried a lot.
And so I want to come back. So you mentioned he made you feel uncomfortable. Was it just pushing those skill boundaries, or what was it particularly that stretched you?
I guess I just had a lot of catching up to do, and I was also just quite an anxious person. And I think there was just a lot of information, it was like, I think I had a really good grasp of theory just from studying like classical piano and things, and getting to a high level quite young with that sort of stuff. And then the jazz, I just remember at Wollongong Con, it was just like, we just didn't really get that much information. It was just like, just play, just improvise, whatever, who cares? It wasn't structured. So I sort of just thought, well, this is chill. It's so easy. I don't really have to think. It's great. Like, it's so different to classical. I can just relax. And then going to learn from these people who really knew their shit, it was like, no, there's infinite things, and you really need to hone your skills, and you need to get this down. And obviously just the chordal theory, and just the ability to play solo piano, and I guess shape a standard and make it tell us, allow it to tell a story, but with your own take on it. Like, every time it's going to be different. And it was like, you really have to have this wide vocabulary to select from, so that when you do go to improvise, it's different every time. And there's just a lot to that. I think it takes many years for that to sink in. And some people, it had already sunk in by the time they got to Berklee, and now they're, it was wild. Like, I have a lot of friends who have gone on to be quite famous or quite well recognized, and I guess they'd almost done the work prior to attending. Yeah. Like, I had like a housemate of mine who, when we were living together, he was hired by like Michelle and Deggiocello, who he's still playing with. And then he went on to play with Seal, and he's playing with everybody now. It's had all, has all these Grammys and he'd already done the work, essentially. Yeah,
no, but that's great. It's great insights. And I mean, it goes without saying Berklee's an amazing breeding ground, let alone coming from another country and feeling like you have to play catch up. So I think
exactly.
It's an amazing effort. And so and please do jump in if I'm jumping too far ahead, but what brought you back to Australia and, so actually I'll probably ask what was the juncture at which you went, okay, I'm going to continue this as far as a full-time living? Was there ever any doubt it was going to be a career for you rather than not a hobby, but just a sideline?
Yeah, so many doubts. Still doubting. It's just been so up and down. I think I'm somebody... So essentially I studied a jazz composition degree, which is really funny because now if I went back, I would go and do the music and production degree because it would just make so much more sense in this day and age. But I did the jazz composition degree and a dual performance degree. So I guess that in itself was a lot to tackle, and it also just doesn't really have a clear career path, especially in Australia. But lucky for me, I think I could see ahead, and I could see how you could be a professional musician just because of my older brother's path, and he's about 7 years older than me. So it was sort of I can see how I can make money. And for some reason, I think maybe just by being stubborn and being, short-sighted, I'd just be like, yep, I'll do this. Yep, I'll do this. And, how do I get gigs? And I'd be going out and seeing a lot of music. I think I came back to Australia in 2017 and was thinking, oh, this is so cool. It's so easy here. I don't have to, I can just, there's nobody on the beach and there's nobody anywhere, and I can just have all this space and time to evolve as a musician, and I can afford to live. So I just sort of, for a couple of years, just thought, oh, this is, I'm living in heaven. And I guess I just went out and checked out a lot of gigs in Sydney at the time, and just kept practicing in my spare time and tried to be hired. I think I was just playing in some reggae bands and then writing my own stuff. I think APRA gave me a commission to write something, and I wrote a suite for almost like a big band. And it's just sort of stumbled along over the years and being thrown into the deep end over and over and over and over. And I'm like, what am I doing? And other times I'd be like, I'm killing this. And, it's just back and forth, back and forth. And at the back of my mind, I was always like, I've got to get back to the States, but it just kind of never happened. But I am about to go back there finally. But it's been a really interesting journey. And I think in Australia, we kind of have to be a jack of all trades. And we have to, it's like this week you're going to do, these 3 gigs or whatever, and they'll just all be so different. And I don't think you have to be like that in America so much. I think you kind of get really good at one thing. And I'm realizing what a blessing that is now, but it was.
Yeah.
There's just no, explanation. It's just learn all this music, and there's no charts. It's just just figure it out. And we're going to do this big long gig, and there's a shit ton of music to learn, and don't ask questions, just do it. Yes. And I just didn't have that training while attending Berklee. I think at Berklee it was very specific,
specialized,
which was good for that time. And then, this has been a whole other journey. And I think I've ended up playing in such different styles of music.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that for sure because, by God, there is diversity there. And we're definitely going to get onto that. So just before we leave the US, and I know you mentioned before we started recording that you just recently had an interaction with Larry Goldings, and we had the pleasure of having Larry on the show about a year ago. I mean, the man is a legend. He's got one of the most wonderful senses of humour I've ever come across. Just tell us a little bit about that, just to go off on a tangent.
Yeah, the old Hans Groener. So I just was over in LA for 6 weeks or so. I just decided that I wanted to get as many piano lessons as I could. And I guess one of my friends that I lived with at Berklee gave me his number because they do a lot of stuff together. And I went over to his house and we hung out and had a lesson, and it was epic because he's such an interesting guy. It was funny. It was quite early in the morning and he started off being, I don't know, just like a little bit cloudy and he's just like waking up, and then started to get into it. And I think he realized that I was responding to things maybe, I was finding him to be really funny, and also just asking a lot of specific questions about his playing and about what he was doing. And so he just lent into it, and then he sort of like effortlessly transitioned between Hans and Larry. And I was like, this is just too good to be true. And then I went and saw him play a couple of times, and he was like so stoked. I think because he was like, oh cool, this is like somebody I can make laugh. I remember like he approached me at one of the gigs I went and saw at the Sam First bar, and he came up, and I think he had a Hans Groiner shirt or something, and he was like, hello, it's Hans, and like put his head behind it. And I was sort of I was really out of it that night, and I was sort of like, oh yeah, hey, like what? He was like a bit put off. And then anyway, we just had all these really funny interactions, and just such an interesting musician, because obviously he's like, the jazz thing is ingrained, and his organ playing is insane. I actually asked him I was like, can you give me some insights on the organ? And he was like, I don't really practice the organ. I just play it like when I needed to. And I was like, oh, good for you.
Yeah, half his luck.
Yeah. But I guess he's somebody that it just feels like he's always exploring and always like looking to do new things, and not really, I don't know how to explain it. It's like he's bloody 15 years old forever,
Yes.
Perhaps.
I think that's a good way of putting it. No, he's a true innovator.
He's an innovator. It's beautiful. And I just love that. I love that he's not bitter or twisted, I mean, a little bit, we all are, but he's just like, excited every day.
He is, yeah. No, amazing musician and guy. And so the reason I asked about Larry Goldings, Freyja, is you mentioned just before I asked about that, about in Australia you need to be jack of all trades, and you've covered. So we are going to cover the huge middle ground that you tend to inhabit, but I'm going to go from one extreme to the other, from Larry Goldings to Ian Moss. Now, I'm going to explain to our non-Australian listeners, Ian Moss is a god in rock circles in Australia. If you use the American example, I'd say something like he's Steve Van Zandt to Bruce Springsteen. He's an amazing guitar player, rock artist, had his own solo career and so on. That'd be my best comparison. But you couldn't get more different to your Berklee experience and stuff like that. So, and being an Australian, I have to ask about Mossy as well. So tell us about how that gig came about. But we are going to go to all that other stuff as well, I promise you.
Yeah, of course. So the Mossy gig, I guess I was starting to play some blues. I think I played a couple of gigs at the Thredbo Blues Festival. Yes, that's the thing. You just end up playing these styles. And I guess I was, leaning into the organ thing and really going for it. I guess I'm quite an enthusiastic performer. And that caught the eye of somebody, and then that person told somebody, I don't know. And then I think he was looking for a keys player, and Clayton Doley was just always with Jimmy Barnes and never free. Right. And Clayton was like his guy, and Clayton's it was like a god to me. I was like, he's like one of the best players of all time. So I was asked, and then I was asked to come and audition, I guess. And so I rocked up, and Mossy and I were I think he was like an hour and a half late. Like I remember sitting in the room being like, what's happening? Is this normal? And then I messaged somebody and they said, oh yeah, no, that's fine. Like that's normal. It's like, okay, this is kind of out. Waited. And then kind of was just like, okay, I need to go outside because I'm going crazy. And he was sitting in his car. And I was like, oh, hey. And he's like, hey. And then stumbled in, and I sort of had to encourage him. And then I just like set up his mic for him and set everything up. And I think he was very like, just, I don't know, I guess probably hungover or, just like easing into the day.
Yeah.
He's an interesting guy. Like maybe he wasn't hungover, but he's like a true musician. Yeah. Like he practices every day, and like on the road, I'll just walk past his room and he'd be shedding and learn and always asking questions about jazz, and just like really intrigued by music and always wanting to learn. So, and quite shy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we did, I think he got me to play a few tunes with him that he'd sent through, and we played I don't know, as a duo. or with the track. It was bizarre. It wasn't what I was expecting. And he was just like, yeah, play more or something. I'd be like, all right. And I'd just like lay in, and then he'd be like, sing this note. And I'd be like, ah. And he's like, scream it. And I'd be like, ah, because he wanted me to do backing vocals.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was pretty out. And then he's like, yeah, I think this is going to work. And I was like, okay, I don't know what's happening right now. And yeah, that first tour, I think that was like August 2023 or whatever. And, it was great. I think it was pretty wild. It was a lot of organ. Like I had just two Nords essentially. And I think they used to take with them like a B3
Okay.
organ, but there was always issues in sound check.
Yeah.
It just took too long. So I just sort of went for it, and it just happened, and it was a really incredible experience. That tour in particular, I think we did like a live album at the Enmore, and that was like my third gig with them, and it was wild because, to be honest, I didn't know who he was.
Okay, that's fair enough. You're allowed to say that.
Yeah, my dad, like, I was just raised, I didn't listen to any Aussie rock.
No, that's right.
I didn't know who he was when I got asked to do the gig, and then I had to investigate, and then I learned so much, and I was very ignorant, and I'm glad that I've had this insight. And it's a whole scene, like the Big Red Bash, and these gigs were like, I was like, wow, this is Australia.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's exactly right. And that's why I asked you about him, because it couldn't get more different from your training and some of the other gigs you played. It is essentially, and I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but it's four to the floor rock. Yeah. It's great. He's a great songwriter from a rock viewpoint, but what did you have to do as a player? Like, as much as you said you needed to lay in on some songs, were there some things you actually had to pull back a little bit compared to your training?
No, not at all. It was very much like, I think I learned so much because Clayton Doley's playing is really incredible, and like really, he just would respond to the music in a very particular way. So I was kind of just transcribing what Clayton had done. And actually, I think somebody was like, play like you don't have to play like Clayton. And I was like, well, that's hard because he's so fucking awesome. So I learned so much about playing organ and playing rock piano, because that was really uncomfortable, because I was like, no, like this is not really my natural instinct and feel. It was very much as it is with any gigs, like learn on the go, and hope for the best. And I think like every time we did the gig, it would just click, like, and I don't know, at that time, I don't drink anymore, but like they're all really big drinkers. And so I would just have a shot of something and just play as much, as I could, and kind of just get into it as much as I could. And Mossy really dug it. And we kind of would have to do these improvised sections. We did a lot of improvising. There's lots of like little solos. And then like in Never Before, we would do this big kind of crazy improv thing together, and that was pretty wild because Mossy he plays with like 2 amps, and it's like so bloody loud, and sometimes I couldn't really hear things properly. It was a pretty tough gig, like on that tour, because it was just like figuring out this whole new thing, and I had all these new roles to play. But I just did what I do for any gig now, which is just like learn it as much as I possibly could. And I guess when you actually come to play the gig, you just go into this whole other thing, and you're responding to the audience, and the audience is going nuts. So that was really cool. That was a really nice feeling. I don't know. I think I was lucky that I'd done all of this other random stuff leading up to that. I wouldn't have been able to do the gig otherwise. Like, I've been doing all these other gigs with people, and I couldn't do any of that when I left Berklee. Do you know what I mean? When I came back to Australia, I was just thrown into all these different scenarios. And so I learned to play, I guess, Aussie rock, and learn to play blues and all these things. I couldn't do that at all when I left Berklee. So I'm lucky in that sense.
No, great.
Isn't it bizarre?
No, and I think it's more than acceptable for you not to know Ian Moss. If you were my age, you'd quite rightly be banished to another country. But
I know. I should be. Like, I hope he never hears this. But
No, but you're of a generation that I wouldn't expect you necessarily would. I think that's more than reasonable. And so I do want to cover, you mentioned there are a whole bunch of artists you played with in the lead up to that, because that's only recent. What were some of the ones, rather than, I mean, I've got literally a list of 20 here, but what would be some of the standouts for you as far as you really learnt some new ways of playing, or how you needed to adjust your approach in the lead up to that, the last couple of years?
one of the main ones, and it's still a thing, is Touch Sensitive, who's, I guess, like a pop synth guy. I don't know how to explain it, but it's sort of like bridging, this like old school synth thing, even 70s synth thing with
love it,
like modern pop. And he taught me to play synth. Yeah, so I got same thing, like I just got that gig because the other keys player couldn't do the tour, and then I was given a profit for it, or I got it one really cheaply because Michael DiFrancesco, who's Touch Sensitive, it's like had a really close relationship with Dave Smith, who designed all those synths, the sequential synths, and it was so uncomfortable, and I just learned on the job. And I think one thing I'm good at is when I'm actually doing the gig, just like really leaning into the performance. And I think the first gig or two was like not great, and then I sort of just started to figure it out. But yeah, there was really incredible audiences, and learning all of these like individual little parts. So I learned, having like 2 or 3 keyboards or synths, and having to really hone in on like specific little lines and emulate them from the track, and then learn about, I guess, Ableton and tracks. And I was also doing I did a course in Ableton, and I guess it's funny, like at that time I was just like, I have no idea what's going on. Like I'm just really just trying to like hold on for dear life. And now I'm like, I know exactly what's going on. And I can talk about it, and I can go into Ableton and do it myself. But that took years. Mikey and he's about to release an album soon, and I did a bit of stuff on that, but he lives in LA, and I was just over at his house recently. We did a bit of a session, and then I'm going back there, and we might do some stuff. But he's just been a really good friend, and somebody that's taught me, I guess, a lot about that world, that synth world, which is another thing I just had no idea about at all, and I'm still learning every day. And I have a few synths, but I guess it's just always been, it's never been, I don't know why this happens to me, but I just get thrown in, and I just will figure it out as I go.
And Freyja, is it fair to say that you're getting to know synths has sort of bled over into your own solo work? So you're finding you're starting to incorporate some of that stuff in your own work? Yeah,
of course. Like it's been such a bed of, interest for me, and I love to try to incorporate a lot of that into my original stuff now. And there's I do like a solo synth sort of thing in this suite of music, and I play some gigs, I'll play a lot of synth, and then other gigs I won't play much at all. It'll be more like, piano and, piano kind of focused stuff, just depending on what the gig is. Sometimes the synth thing doesn't even probably work for that scenario, and I'll do it anyway, and people are like, whoa, what's going on? But I guess it's been a real joy to learn about synthesizers. And also I've just completed my master's at Sydney Conservatorium of Music, and that taught me a lot more about that world, and about synthesis, and about MIDI, and just because of the nature of the master's the research topic that I chose, which was essentially, I had some motion detectors made that are waterproof, or most of the time waterproof. I had them made by Ed Kushel at Elk Electronic in Wollongong, and I wore them surfing. And so that motion data that was recorded while surfing would transfer into MIDI data, and then upload that into Ableton, and then that would I would then process it through VSTs or synthesizers.
That's cool.
And it was really fun. And it was it's been like another learning curve. I just learned so much, and I just had no idea about any of it at the start.
Yeah.
And now I think I'm like, okay, yeah, I think I'm just starting to get a grasp. I've just written a whole research project about a big thesis, and finally I'm like, oh, yeah, I think I get this. And then,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
it's just kind of how it goes. And then that will send you into a whole other little world, and you get to meet, or you hear all this other music that you just had no idea about, and that really broadens your horizons. Right. And I love that. Like, it's just really beautiful. And I've learned, I don't know, I've met so many, great people, or learned about artists that I just would never have discovered. And for me, that's sort of, the best part of this little musical journey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm assuming you've run across Sarah Bell Reid at some stage, because she does lots of stuff with motion, sensors and all that sort of stuff.
I have heard of her, but not. Yeah, can you tell me more? Because
that's okay. Yeah, we had her on the show recently, and she had lots of fascinating stories in a similar vein. Yeah. So.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah. No, she was great. And so I do have to ask the inevitable synth question now that we've got you in this area, and that is what do you own? And then I understand it'll vary gigs, but what are some of your go-to synths that you do tend to take to a gig, just for your work?
Yeah, for my stuff, usually I take my Prophet Rev 2, and then I have a Sequential Pro 3 that I have started using, and I think that was like maybe one of the last synths that Dave Smith worked on.
Yeah.
Before he died. And I guess I have my Korg mini log, which I sometimes take.
Nice.
I have, what else do I have? I don't even know. I have a Moog Fatty.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
I love playing my Novation bass station. I've done a lot of bass gigs. That's really fun. Yeah, like my just MIDI keyboards connected to Keyscape on Ableton. Yeah, I've got some others.
And are you running? Well, that's a good point. So either via Ableton or other, are you running soft synths and that depending on the gig?
I generally don't, but I do. I have for specific, like tours or whatever. But I generally don't do that, even though it would probably make life easier. But then, I don't know, there's something about like the physicality of like having, the proper rig and not a computer, and just like not thinking about it, just chucking all that shit in my car and going and like getting on the gig and being like, this is too heavy. Why did I do this? Why didn't I think ahead and like have a soft set? But I think even for the Mossy gig I used for that first tour, I had to use like a specific patch and just for one tune, but and I have had to do that for like probably touch sensitive gigs and different like hip hop gigs and things like that. It's pretty murky now, but I often record using different like patches on Ableton and using my MIDI keyboard and compose that way.
Great. No, excellent. And the other, I do need to go again from one extreme to the other. We're sort of ping-ponging between lots of genres. You had this amazing project, A Kind of Hush, the music of Karen Carpenter, and so you obviously played, I believe, an MD role, also playing and with some amazing artists. Tell us a little bit about the genesis of that, and I do want to talk, because Karen Carpenter is obviously an iconic player, musician, songwriter. What sort of kicked that off?
So I was asked by Katie Noonan to, I guess, MD and play keys on this tour, on this Karen Carpenter tour. So Katie was on vocals as well as Abby Dobson and Melinda Schneider. We had a really epic band. Yeah, so initially it was supposed to be Loz Benson on drums, but she got asked to do, I guess, the Angus and Julia Stone European tour. So it ended up being Dexter, Katie's son, on drums last minute, which was pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah, and he crushed it. I think he's only like 18. And then, Lucy Clifford on bass and Kathleen Halloran on guitar. Both bass, and Lucy's been living in New York and Boston for many years, and Kathleen's obviously Kate Sobrano's right-hand woman. So, it was a pretty kick-ass all-female group, and essentially my role was to develop the arrangements and charts and do all of that, and then kind of in the actual rehearsals try to create some clarity. But there was a lot going on at that time in everybody's lives. It happened to be quite a chaotic little time. So we missed, there was a lot of last minute rehearsal stuff. And I think our first gig was like sold out at the Sydney Opera House in the main room there. And
wow.
There was so much pressure, and I was like, we are not prepared. And then they loved it, but things happened, like I think Kathleen's pedal, something happened with her amp. There was just like so many things went wrong, but it was still a really beautiful gig that people relished because, I guess the music speaks volumes, and people, that music has obviously been with people since they were children, and Karen's story is just this heartbreaking story. And that was another really insightful thing for me, because I hadn't explored her catalogue or her life prior to that. And then that was like, wow, like that's this whole other world.
Yeah.
That I was opened up to, and the arrangements are just insane. That music is really hard.
And that's what I wanted to ask you, Frey. Yeah, I wanted to ask you that. What did you learn about her as a musician by doing those arrangements and playing those gigs?
Yeah, so I guess I learned that a lot of the music and the arrangements were written by her brother, Richard Carpenter, and he was kind of like a savant pianist and I guess composer, arranger, and I think their mum was like championing Richard and saying that he was kind of like the star child. And Karen, I guess she started playing drums and singing. And I think their mum was quite, I don't know, she just like almost wouldn't acknowledge that was like a possibility. And Karen was just such a natural musician and kind of, I guess, she became the centerpiece of this group, and they kind of took off, I think, and Karen started to just like do the lead vocal role and get away from the drums, even though like I think that was her real strong point, But she sort of left it up to Richard to do all of the decisions regarding the arrangements and all of that. And it seemed like she just had this sort of, like maybe not a sense of herself. Like she didn't really ever find that. And she was quite tortured as a person. And she dealt with anorexia her whole life, and maybe just never really found her place. And I think she was not really supported properly by her parents. And Richard was just kind of, I guess he ended up just being the decision maker through all of that. And it just seems like a very unfortunate situation, because I think she was herself like a savant and such an incredible musician, but because of perhaps the time that she was born, and
that's right,
just like the circumstances at that time, she wasn't able to lean into that the way that she would be able to now. And, and then just battled this anorexia and died at 32, I think.
Yeah, it was very young.
Really young.
It was around there.
It's horrifying. And they did so much. They made so much music, and it's incredible. Like I was blown away. I was just like, just the dedication and time put into that stuff is so, so stunning. But it was a really sad tour. Like it felt heavy. Like it felt really heavy because we were talking about these stories every night. And I think each of us as musicians too, we're all women, and we all exist in this realm of like mostly male dominated environments, and we're all really different. And I think we just all we've had big times, we had a lot to talk about and reflect on, and it was a hard time for Katie personally, and just there was a lot. I think and we did a lot of shows. We did like 20 shows back to back. They were all sold out. It was cool. But it was a big tour.
But you raised a really important point there. Are things improving in regards to gender balance and treatment of women in music? I know I've had this discussion with a number of our guests, and it feels like sometimes it's improving and sometimes it don't. Even in sort of the past decade, do you feel it's getting better, or does it feel like it's a little bit stagnant as far as progress?
I feel like it depends where you are and what the gig is, who you're around. to me, I feel constantly torn by that. Like some days I'm like, oh wow, things are really changing. Like I maybe just the way somebody's speaking to me at a gig or showing me, just the time of day and perhaps wanting to receive feedback from me. Whether that's just that I'm getting older now and I've done a bunch of stuff, or whether it seems to be this thing that there's an awareness. And then obviously being asked to do certain gigs like the Mossy gig and the Katie gig, like I think there's obviously a push to try and champion women in those ways. A lot of other times I feel, especially in Australia, I feel like we're sort of quite stagnant here. And I think the nature of our industry is that things don't really change. When I think they are changing, often I'm then like reminded quite quickly that no, it's always just stays the same. Like things don't really develop.
Yeah.
But, they're trying. I mean, there's more females on bills and stuff, but it's always men at the top. Like it's kind of just the way it's always been. But it's just, it just depends what it is. And I think I'm lucky that I've had such a wide breadth of experiences. So I've been able to lean into my own, and I've really lent into my original stuff. I think that that's really important, because otherwise I probably wouldn't feel very fulfilled, because there are, you do feel like a bit of a fish out of water at times, and you do feel like, oh, the men always get those things, it's always going to be the same people. Or you just feel a little bit othered. But I think it's also a personality thing. So, like, depends what type of person you are. Maybe, like, some women suit, like, being on the road and being in those environments more. And then other women, it doesn't feel so comfortable for them.
Yeah.
And it obviously depends on who the band is and
that's right,
what sort of tour it is. So, for example, Missy Higgins's band, that's mostly all women. And, it's mostly women, but there's a couple guys. But I think just the nature of it, she's had babysitters on the road for the, kids that might come along, and kind of, I guess it's just like that environment, I think, is very nurturing for women. And then obviously, a lot of other things. And I've obviously spoken to a lot of women who, they just feel pretty like, oh, I don't belong here. Like, this is not, I did it again. I did another tour and I still don't feel like I belong, or like I was treated this way on the bus, the tour bus, or it was really obvious to me that I wasn't respected. And I've experienced that a lot. But then other times, like I did a gig recently that I felt so seen and heard, and I guess, and then that will happen, and I'll be like, so relaxing and lovely to be in this environment. It just depends.
It does
what
depend.
You're doing. So I don't know. It's hard to give specifics because you don't want to call anybody out.
I agree. Yeah, and understand that you
can't. But
I
think jazz as a genre is pretty. It's pretty stagnant in Australia. But in the States, I feel way more seen and accepted, and I think there's a lot more work available for women.
Yeah, that's right.
As performers. So I'm kind of getting over there soon, trying to make the move. Yeah.
A great perspective. Thank you for that.
That's
and
okay.
We haven't covered a whole bunch of really amazing artists you work with, so I'm actually going to ask you a question, Freyja, to pick 3 artists that have made the biggest impression on you and why throughout your career to date.
Right. That I've performed with, or?
Yeah, that you've worked with,
I guess 3 artists, that I've, let me rack my brain. I feel like, obviously, I think I've listed 2 of them, which would be Ian Moss and Touch Sensitive, just because I guess those gigs are quite, well received, and there's a lot of material to learn, and I think it really pushed me along in my ability to play in those styles, and styles that I hadn't really explored as much. And then, I don't know, I've played with Stella Donnelly. She's just an amazing person, and that was really beautiful to be a part of. It was kind of cool to go into those gigs because they were road dogs and they'd just done so much touring for so many years, and that was quite foreign to me, and just like learning about that. And they're not really session players, they're more just, it's like a band, and that was really cool to just like do a few gigs with them and sort of see what that lifestyle is like. It was really beautiful. Incredible songwriter and performer. I don't know, can you remind me of anybody?
No, that's good. Yeah, look, I mean, well, some of the ones that I have listed, I think you've covered off some really great ones, but I mean, there's Montaigne, there's Casey Donovan, Matt Keegan, Sandy Evans, you've mentioned Lucy Clifford, Genevieve Chadwick, Lyra Birdland.
Yeah, I guess Matt Keegan for me so Matt Keegan is somebody that I looked up to from a really early age when I started learning jazz at Wollongong Conservatorium, and he would come down and perform for us, and it was always like, whoa, Matt Keegan Trio, and I was like, wow, this guy is such an innovator on obviously an incredible sax player, but just an innovator as a composer, and was highly revered by our crew and obviously a lot of, Australian, I guess, audiences and musicians. And then Matt's been great for me because he produced my first album, and that essentially made it possible for us to kind of actually finish the album. That album consists of a lot of quite densely composed tracks and through composed stuff. So it was a lot of work, and we did that at Free Energy Device Studios in Sydney, and Matt I think he just made it possible for us to actually get through all of the material and would kind of say, yeah, that worked, this didn't work. And just having him on that was really lovely. And I think maybe he responded to that by then getting me to do a tour with just a through composed piece of music he'd written, and that band, I think it was consisted of Cam Undie on bass and Miles Thomas on drums, Veronique Surratt on violin, and it was so beautiful. And just as a group, I was really honored to be involved, and I was able to, I guess, learn a lot about how to incorporate the synthesizer and the piano stuff into through composed compositions. And I guess it was just kind of another big learning curve and something that I never expected to be asked to do. And then I did some other gigs with Matt with his quartet last year, and he just produced my recent album.
Great.
At ABC. So it's been a really nice thing with Matt over the years. We've had a really cool relationship where I think he's been able to be really real with me and show me a lot of stuff and maybe helped me develop in different ways. And also I composed for a video game and wrote the score for a video game, which was supposed to be released not with Rockstar, but with Video Games Deluxe in Sydney. And the guy that asked me to do it, he's the creator of Alain Noir, which is quite a recognized game. And it's a psychological thriller, and he asked me to compose jazz for it. So I ended up composing for quite a large ensemble with horns and strings and rhythm section, and we did a bunch of days in the studio, and the actual album is coming out this year, and Matt was there for that too. So he was kind of like, I finished all the scores, and then I'd take it to him and be like, hey, any advice on how to fix this up and make it more clear for the band? And then just in the actual studio, having a right hand, like a wingman, like having somebody to I guess, verbalize things or take control of the horns if I'm taking control of the rhythm section or whatever. So that was, it's been a fruitful relationship for me. And it's nice that, it's with somebody that I really looked up to when I was younger. I think we just kind of get each other.
Brilliant picks.
Yeah. So, it's
that's
always,
great.
Thank you.
No, brilliant picks.
Yeah, no worries.
Everything's related. And so we'll move on to our last few standard questions, Frey. So the first one is tagging a keyboard player, and you've already mentioned so many great ones, but we like to ask each guest to tag a keyboard player that they would like to hear more about their story.
Yeah, so a keyboard player and pianist that I've looked up to since I was young is Danny Pliner in Sydney. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's probably my favourite pianist in Australia. And yeah, one of my favorite worldwide pianists. So such a unique voice, and you'll be able to catch him almost every night of the week, like at Lazy Bones or gigging somewhere. And I guess he has this really incredible ability to fuse sort of, I guess, more like traditional Latin styles and really almost like classical avant-garde styles with jazz and hip-hop, and just such an incredible natural player. And I think any band that he's a part of is just enhanced so much. So I've had to sub for him a bunch, and just learning what he's like laid down on the tracks and recordings or live gigs, and it's just like, whoa, like how do you think of this? So I mean, I know him from when I was really little because he is in my brother's band The Strides, but then I've just seen him play so many times, and I think maybe parts of my playing would probably come from what I've learned from him, I hope.
Great pick.
Yeah.
No, we'll definitely be checking him out. No, that's great.
He is a beast, like a beast musician, like somebody that's just, it's hard to explain, but it just like, it will just be better than you ever expected. Yeah. When you go and hear him play. And he's like the real deal because he's gigging like every night, you know, and doing a lot of studio work, production work. It's incredible. Yeah. So Danny Pliner.
Danny Pliner, noted. Thank you.
No worries.
And our second last question, the dreaded Desert Island Disc question. So 5 albums that float your boat at the moment.
5 albums that float my boat at the moment. So one album that I spent a lot of time rinsing and repeating last year was this trio album with Dylan Day, Sam Wilkes and Craig Weinrib, like LA-based players. And I think they recorded it at some really beautiful mountain, snowy location. I actually had the opportunity to hang out with Dylan Day quite a bit while I was in LA, and I just met him by chance, and I was like, oh my God, your album is like one of my favorite albums of all time right now. And he was like, thank you, miss. He's like, we went to school together. And I was like, I didn't realize that. It's like, for like a semester. And then I dropped out, and then I was homeless for like 5 years. And anyway, he's on like he's like a big deal, but very, I don't know, maybe just very sensitive dude, like really sensitive ears. I think he got rid of all of his guitars, and he just has an acoustic guitar now. But he's, if you look it up, he does, I think recently. Yeah, will do. Yeah, incredible guitarist, Dylan Day. Yeah, so that trio album is just stunning to me, the way it's very sparse. There's a lot of space and just groove and slow, and I don't know, I just melt into it. So that one is a big thing. No piano on that. I guess I also listen to a lot of Hania Rani, a Polish pianist. She's probably inspired me the most as far as like, I guess, music that's inspired my current approach and probably the album that I've just done. So she does a lot of kind of solo piano work where she'll be using multiple pianos at once and improvising and doing really interesting prepared piano stuff. And now she sings on a lot of stuff now, and it's kind of taken like more of a pop turn recently, but she's incredible, and she'll do some band stuff too. Right. But she tours a lot. She's become a really big deal. She's kind of with like Gondwana Records. Like anything on Gondwana Records, I'm like, I love this. So she's really worth checking out. Fergus McCreadie, I've been checking out quite a bit. He's like a Scottish pianist, quite young. I think he's like 27 or something. And it's just kind of almost, develops these really folkloric melodies. I saw him play at South by Southwest when I was there a couple of years ago, playing with somebody, and he was just playing in this jazz bar with his trio, and I was like, man, this guy's a mofo. And then, I've just checked out a lot of his stuff. It's just this really beautiful fusion of improvised jazz piano with these like really folky sounds, and I just think it's so beautiful, and it's so representative of like, I guess, his roots and like the environment that he's in, and it's all about nature. And I just froth on that.
Right.
So these aren't actual albums, are they? I'm just listing artists.
No, that's okay. If you trust me, I'll find one to pick from their discography if you're happy with that.
Yeah, well, Hania's one would be Esja. It's ESJA.
Great.
And then my favorite Fergus album is Forest Floor. And
Right.
then the Sam Wilkes Dylan Day album, and Craig Weinrib album, that's just their names. So it doesn't have an album title.
No worries, I'll find that.
Yeah.
No problem.
An album I always return to is Barney McCall's Mother of Dreams and Secrets, which I guess has like really inspired a lot of my compositions.
Okay.
And he just, really fuses, I guess, like Cuban sort of styles with jazz arrangements for larger ensembles with horns, and it's such a dope album, and it just grooves, and his playing is
Right.
ridiculous. Yeah, that's one of my favorite albums of all time, and I constantly return to that. Also, what's another album? There's like a live Yoshi's album, Mulgrew Miller album, Live at Yoshi's Volume 1.
Okay.
That's another one I listen to a lot. Mulgrew Miller for me is like the man. He's just somebody that I guess obviously a beast, jazz pianist, but like was such a beautiful educator and just had this pocket, but also just was able to, play circles around like bebop styles. Yeah. But just, I don't know, it just seemed to me like that's like the OG almost, like more than anybody.
Right.
Yeah, Mulgrew is just the one for me. I've transcribed him a lot. Not that I can, do what his hands do, because I'm pretty sure one of his hands was the size of 3 of my hands, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I've transcribed him a lot and learned a lot of, lines and licks and vocabulary from him. So that's a really beautiful album.
That's a good 5.
Jarrett's, is that 5 or 4?
Yeah, you've done 5, but I'll give you a 6. It's quite often to have 6. Also, I could have miscounted. So add it in either way.
Okay. I guess, one of my favorite albums of all time is the Keith Jarrett Cologne concert.
Yeah. Colm concerts.
Colm concerts. It's just absurd. Like, I actually don't think it is. I don't think that that's real. Like, I still listen to that and think it's just like so moving, and I think I cry every single time.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's just absurd to me. And the fact that he was in such pain and that the piano was so shit and all of these things that I think, when you're on the road, it's like your worst nightmare, like you can't imagine being put in that scenario. And then that's what came out. Like, I just can't believe that that's real. I'm still just blown away. And I guess what happens with our ears every time we listen to an album is it's different, and you've developed as a musician, or you've been listening to this and it's kind of changed the way you perceive it. So that one for me is just continuously evolving. Yeah, I just think I get more and more out of it each time I hear it. I think Matt McMahon.
It sounds amazing on vinyl.
Yes. And Matt McMahon's doing a tribute to that or something in Sydney.
Oh, wow.
I think it's sold out. But I should have listed Matt McMahon because he's one of my favorite pianists ever. And he's, Sydney pianist, and I've rinsed and, repeated his albums a lot too. But
a lot too.
Anyway.
Oh, that's good. There's only so many picks, but no, thank you. I really appreciate some totally original picks there, which is great.
Yeah.
Our very last question, Freyja, is what we call a Quickfire 10. So 10 short and sharp answers to 10 short and sharp questions. So, and you've already talked about your amazing upbringing with an eclectic amount of music. Do you recall the first album you heard that really had an impact on you?
Yeah, I guess the first album I ever heard that had a huge impact on me was Beethoven Lives Upstairs. And that was like a kid's album that I listened to in the car every day. So, yeah.
Yep, no wonder you were doomed to a life of music. That's the way it should be. Most important pre-gig ritual. So it doesn't matter the gig, but is there something you'd like to do before you go on stage to feel settled? Yeah,
so that used to be to drink alcohol, but now I'm starting to do breathing exercises, and that seems to help settle me to some extent. Doesn't last very long, but I'm trying to incorporate that into my practice and then also incorporate it on stage. And I think, yeah, for, recording the album last week, I was probably like in the middle of all these songs, which just sound a little bit funny. But, yeah.
No, that's good. No, good one. It's better than a shot, that's for sure. If you hadn't been a musician, what do you think your career choice would have been?
I never had a specific career choice growing up, but I have studied different things through the years, and I'd probably be a psychologist. I think I studied psychology during COVID. So, yeah, I'd probably go with that because that's like a big thing to me. I like to investigate a lot about psychology. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, great. Now, I think I know the answer, and I think we can nearly skip over this one. Transpose button or adjust on the fly? I can't imagine you're a transpose button person.
Yeah, well, I actually didn't know about the transpose button until a really disastrous gig. It was actually at the house of the Lime Cordial boys, and I think it was like a really, really hot day, and it was like 40 degrees. We were doing this thing for vodka or something, and I was playing with this artist called Iluka, and then Lime Cordial were playing, and we were all hanging out, and then we had to get on the stage, and we couldn't even stand on the stage because it was so hot. And then our gear was all melting down, and the laptop for the tracks wasn't working. Anyway, I had like a blanket over my keyboard, and the very first track, I picked the blanket off so that I could actually touch the keyboard and it would stop turning off. And I guess the transpose button had been touched and started the track. And I was like, whoa, what is that? But I couldn't really hear it properly because the in-ears weren't working. And yeah, we had to restart the tune all over again. So, and then there was one track with the Katie Noonan tour where I had to use the transpose button one time, which was, yeah. But, I'm all about the transpose
Generally,
button.
no, but you can use it, yeah. Favourite gig you've ever done, if that's possible?
Yeah, my favourite gig I've ever done, or series of gigs or a tour, was with Elephant Tracks. They're like a hip-hop label in Sydney. And we did a tour last year for their 25th anniversary. And I don't think I've ever been a part of something so heartwarming and beautiful in my life. Like that was incredible. Yeah. And I felt so...
Love it.
So respected and so able to just be myself. Yeah.
Excellent. Favourite city you've ever played?
It's weird because I've played in the States in the various cities, but I think my favourite city to play in is Melbourne. Yeah. I think that...
Validly so.
Yeah, there's just something really... It just feels natural there. It feels like people really... respect art and music, and I love being there. I just love being around it. Yeah. So probably Melbourne.
Yeah, exactly. Favourite song you've played at a gig in the last year?
Shit, that is hard. Probably one of my tunes, to be honest. Yeah. There's this tune called Blissing that I just really love performing with my band, and it's different every time, and I just love that feeling because I think it's so personal. Yeah, so...
No, that's great. Name one thing you'd like to see invented that would make your life as a keyboard player easier.
Just a really light rig that feels good and sounds good, like obviously...
Yep, the holy grail.
Oh my goodness, can you imagine? It would just make my back so much less sore.
Yes. I've got good news though, Freyja. It gets worse as you get older.
Oh man, I just can't figure it out. Yeah. I'm just trying to do all this yoga and shit to just, calm it down. Painkillers is the answer.
No, I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
Favourite music documentary or movie?
My favourite music documentary at the moment is Waiting for My Real Life. It's about Colin Hay, and I've watched it, probably 3 times in the last few weeks.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, he's the best. I've been listening to so much Colin Hay lately.
Yeah.
I'm really excited.
Good move.
I'm going to meet him actually next week, which I'm pretty ecstatic about. And I think...
Absolutely.
I mean, I would have been...
the word icon is...
Sorry.
I was going to say the word icon is bandied around often, but it's deservedly applied to him. He's an icon.
He is an icon. He is just obviously an incredible musician, but a beautiful person. And I think there's so much to learn from people like that. And he's still touring a lot. And he's, 72 or something, and just, had such an interesting journey. It's just stunning.
Absolutely. And last but not least, Freyja, your favourite non-musical activity or hobby? Actually, I think you've already alluded to it as far as what keeps you sane outside of music. I think I know this answer.
Yes. Obviously surfing. I have been doing that a lot the last few years, and it's nice to get good at something or better at something that's outside of music. And every time I get out of the surf, all of the stuff melts away and I don't worry about who I am or what I'm doing and what I should be doing and why I'm not here and there, So I think it's a nice complement to this really odd journey as a musician and as a professional musician.
And I think you're surfing waves in the music field as well, and I don't think you're about to get dumped in a wave in the near future. You can tell, and I'm hopeless at surfing analogies because I don't surf, but you know what I mean. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, Freyja. Look, we're excited to see what's yet to come, let alone the amazing career you've had to date. And I'm definitely looking forward to checking you out at a gig in the near future, but can't thank you enough for joining us.
I'd love to see you at a gig. And I'm so honoured to be involved in this. I think it's a really beautiful project you have going on. And I'm going to dive into all of the other podcasts. So thanks for having me. Yeah.
And there we have it. Gee, it was great speaking with Freyja on her career and some of the collaborations she's done. I hope you enjoyed it as well, whether you're an Australian listener that understands, working with Ian Moss through to the amazing collaborations she's done in the US here and elsewhere. There's lots to digest for that one, and we can't thank Freyja enough for her time. I'm very excited to see what the next 10, 20, 30 years will bring for her. And I never thought, aside from myself in the city I live in, someone else would have hung out, so to speak, and she did it in a much more impressive way with Larry Goldings. As you know, we love Larry here on the show, and he was very generous with his time. If you haven't checked out that interview with Larry, please do so. Well and truly worth it. So again, thank you for listening. A quick shout out to our gold and silver sponsors, the wonderful Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew. Thank you, Tammy, as always, for your support. Dave Bryce and the team from the musicplayer.com forums. Can't thank you enough for your support, and it's such a great place to hang out and talk keyboards and performance. The excellent Mike from Midnight Mastering. If you like having quality mixes and masters done for your own work, definitely consider Mike. Great quality at a decent price at midnightmastering.com. And last but definitely not least, the brilliant Derry Evans from the sunny land of Wales. Thank you, Derry, for your ongoing support. It's hugely appreciated. So again, thank you to all of you out there, and we'll be back in a week or two. And until then, keep on playing.